Hello. My name is Rosie, and I'm 28 years old. For most of my life, I thought my family was solid, until everything changed. Growing up, it was just my dad and me, and we were close. My mom passed away when I was young, and he raised me the best he could. But then he remarried, and that's when things took a turn. At first, I wanted to believe my stepmother, Grace, was just trying to find her place in our lives. I gave her the benefit of the doubt and tried to welcome her as family. But it quickly became clear she had her own agenda. Small things started to shift, little digs at me, subtle ways of undermining my relationship with my dad. I tried to ignore it, but eventually, her intentions became impossible to overlook. One evening, I came home to find my dad looking furious. Grace stood beside him with a smug expression, acting as though she'd finally caught me doing something terrible. She accused me of lying and trying to manipulate him for money. Her words were twisted, painting me as some greedy, deceitful son. The worst part. My dad believed her. Without giving me a chance to defend myself, he told me to leave. I was stunned, hurt beyond words. In that moment, it felt like I'd lost everything, my home, my family, my father's trust. And as I walked out, I realized that Grace's hold over him was stronger than anything we had shared. I spent the next few weeks trying to make sense of what had happened. Living out of a small rented room, I worked odd jobs to get by. It was hard to accept that my own father had chosen to believe Grace over me, but deep down, I knew she had planned this all along. She'd always wanted control, and with me out of the picture, she finally had it. Days turned into weeks, and every now and then, I'd hear bits of news about what was happening back home. Friends and neighbors mentioned seeing Grace making changes, selling some of Dad's prized possessions, redecorating the house, and even taking control of his finances. It seemed her plans went far beyond just getting rid of me. Then, one day, I got a message from an old family friend. He told me that Grace had convinced my dad to sign over the family inheritance to her name, claiming it was for family security. My stomach churned. I knew this was part of her grand plan, a way to take everything my father and I held dear. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I heard that Grace had started talking about divorce. She had taken what she wanted and was now planning to leave my father high and dry. Hearing that Grace was threatening divorce felt like the final blow. She had manipulated her way into my father's life, separated us, taken control of our inheritance, and now planned to leave him with nothing. My anger was overwhelming, but so was my sadness for my dad. He had been so blinded by her lies that he had sacrificed his relationship with me. Now, he was the one left alone, betrayed by the very person he had trusted the most. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my father standing there, looking more defeated than I had ever seen him. His shoulders were slumped, his face years older, as though the weight of everything had finally caught up to him. "Rosie," he began, his voice thick with emotion. I was wrong." Those words hung in the air, and for a moment, I just stared at him, unsure how to respond. After all the pain, the betrayal, and the countless nights wondering if he even cared, here he was, apologizing. It was almost surreal. He went on to explain that he had finally seen Grace for who she really was. She had taken everything he had, including the inheritance meant to support both of us, and was now threatening to leave him with nothing. He admitted that he had been foolish, that he had let her lies cloud his judgment, and that he deeply regretted pushing me away. It wasn't easy to forgive him. But seeing the pain in his eyes, I knew that we had both suffered because of Grace's deceit. And more than anything, I knew that if we wanted any chance at recovering what was lost, we'd have to work together. With my father's apology accepted, we decided it was time to take action. Grace had manipulated us both, but now we were ready to confront her together. We started by gathering any documents or evidence we could find, old records, financial statements, anything that showed my father's original ownership of our inheritance. He had been careless in trusting Grace, but there were still a few pieces of evidence she hadn't managed to erase. Together, we reached out to a lawyer. After explaining the entire situation, he assured us that we had a solid case. Grace might have manipulated her way into controlling the inheritance, but the law was still on our side. It would take time and patience, but we had a chance to expose her schemes. The first step was confronting Grace directly. One evening, my father and I returned to the house together, determined to make our stance clear. She was shocked to see me, and the moment I walked in, her face twisted with anger. "What are you doing here?" she sneered, clearly thrown off by our united front. I stayed calm, letting my father speak. "Grace," he said, his voice steady. "I know everything. I know what you've done, to me, to Rosie, and to our family. You've taken what doesn't belong to you, and it's time you face the consequences." She laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You think you can scare me? You signed everything over, remember?" She sounded confident, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. "We have proof," I replied firmly. "And we've spoken to a lawyer. It's only a matter of time before the court sees what you've done." For a moment, Grace's mask of arrogance slipped, and I saw panic flash across her face. She realized we were serious, that her manipulations were finally catching up to her. She had underestimated our resolve, thinking she could divide and conquer us. But now, she was facing the consequences of her actions. Seeing that her usual tricks wouldn't work on us anymore, Grace's composure began to crumble. Her confidence faded, replaced by anger and desperation. "You think you're going to take everything back," she spat, her voice trembling. "I earned that inheritance. Keeping this family together, putting up with all of you." I could feel the tension in the room as my father held his ground. "No, Grace," he said firmly. "You manipulated, lied, and tore our family apart for your own gain. And now, you'll pay for it." As we proceeded with legal action, things moved quickly. Grace was served with court papers, and our lawyer helped us build a strong case that exposed the manipulation she had used to gain control of our family's assets. In court, her lies began to unravel. Witnesses, neighbors and family friends who had seen her behavior over the years, testified on our behalf. The court saw through her schemes, and she could no longer keep up her facade of innocence. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor, restoring the inheritance to my father and me. Grace was ordered to repay a substantial amount of money she had wrongfully taken and faced serious consequences for her actions. After the legal battle ended, my father and I stood outside the courthouse, feeling a sense of closure. We had lost a lot, but we had come through it stronger and wiser, with a renewed bond that Grace could no longer destroy. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful for the future. As my father and I left the courthouse, a wave of relief washed over us. We had fought a long, painful battle, but justice had finally been served. Grace was out of our lives, and our inheritance was safe. More importantly, the bond between my father and me had been repaired, and we both felt a sense of peace we hadn't known in years. In the weeks that followed, we began rebuilding our lives. My father was a changed man, more aware and cautious, but also more appreciative of the family he had left. We spent more time together, making up for the years we had lost. For the first time since my mother's passing, it felt like we were truly a family again. One evening, as we sat together over dinner, my father looked at me with gratitude in his eyes. "Rosie, I'm sorry it took me so long to see the truth. I should have trusted you." I smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift a little more. "I'm just glad we're here now. That's all that matters." As the months passed, the scars left by Grace's betrayal began to heal. I moved back home, and we started fresh, with no secrets or lies dividing us. The house felt lighter, warmer, as though a dark cloud had finally lifted. We knew we had been through the worst, but we had come out stronger. And that was something Grace could never take from us. With our inheritance secured and our family whole again, we looked forward to a new chapter, a chapter of peace, healing, and a bond that no one could break.